Morning and happy Friday. So the weekend is almost here. The heat wave is breaking and we are looking at a fabulous weekend ahead. Um, okay, so I get that might not be in your best interest because you guys are going to be working on those revisions. This is it. This is the biggest piece, honestly, of the whole semester. If you can get these revisions tightened up, um, and produce a fantastic capstone essay. I want to make a few comments about general revision strategies for most of you. Okay, so if it applies, you use it. If it doesn't, you say, hey, I already did that and I did it really well, and you let it go. I did leave feedback on everyone who submitted a rough draft, so you should see those comments directly on your draft. So if you hear some of this, it might be repetitive. And that's okay too, because it never hurts to hear things more than once. Um, okay, so in all, the drafts were pretty good. Some of you knocked it out of the park. There were just some great pieces of writing. Others of you are still struggling. Um, I don't know if it was maybe not a ton of time put in or not as much time as you should have put into it, or if you were overwhelmed with the research and couldn't find your own voice. But I'm going to give you some tips for looking at that, and there are some things posted inside that module as well. Okay, for starters, you have to have an engaging introduction. So many of you just jumped in without doing that piece that I've emphasized so many times, and that is allowing your reader to understand and appreciate why this is even a conversation that you're going to have. All right, you have to make your reader care about it. You have to connect to your audience. So in some way, you need to establish the warrant. That is the reason that you're even producing this conversation, this argument, this position. I've given you a lot of different strategies for doing that, and several of you did this very well. You might begin with a current controversy, something that's happening right now that the reader can really kind of sink his teeth into. You might begin with some startling statistics. You might begin anecdotally. You might begin with even I lost my train of thought. with any kind of a connection that's going to do its job at connecting your reader to your topic. So once you do that, then you can lead into another paragraph that looks at the controversy in whole, provides maybe some background information, and then you can move into your position, your claim, your thesis statement. As far as that goes, you have to establish clearly what your point of view is. For some of you, that might happen in the very first paragraph. For others of you, it might not happen until the third paragraph. Still others might happen by the end of the paper. Typically, it appears toward the beginning, but not always. You don't want to just raise a question. All right, this is your answer to that research question. So that's what you're going to go on to prove throughout the remainder of the paper, through various appeals, through logical development of support for your argument. All right, so that's what you have to put into place. Some of you have all of those things, but they're just very disorganized. Okay, so as you revise, go back and think about the most effective way to build your argument. Okay, think about how you can best promote your position, persuade your reader, and remain logical along the way. Okay, so those are the key sort of large components. Inside of that, when you start building your evidence, think about your papal analysis. We talked about the purpose, the audience, the presentation, the evidence, and the language. Those are all the same tools that you're going to use when you build your own argument. Everything that you did when you evaluated other people's arguments, now you want to apply them in your own argument. So when you start producing your evidence and you're pulling from expert testimony, all right, so you're integrating outside source material, you have to remember, as I was talking the other day, you have to remember how to smoothly integrate that material. You have your position, and that position is what the essay is about. You are going to rely on your experts to bolster your beliefs, okay, and to build your argument. You don't just want to drop them in randomly. You want to sandwich them. You want to build them. You want to elaborate on them. Those are your key points of support. So make sure that you give them some time to shine. So you introduce, you preview, okay, so you lead into it. You don't just drop. And then you present. If it's a direct quote, you're using quotation marks. If you're paraphrasing, you're not, but you still need to lead into it. And then you have to follow through, which means after you've previewed, presented, and followed through, or after you've previewed and presented, then you have to follow through. You have to relate the significance to the reader. Just because you know why it's important, you can't assume that your reader is inside your mind and making all those connections. So that's your job, to sort of develop that connection. Lead it back to your thesis statement. Lead it back to the topic sentence of that paragraph. Do all that you can to construct a full-bodied and developed piece of support in each of those cases. One of the other I don't, problems, I guess maybe challenges with this paper has been, for some of you, that research mode that you dive into, where you kind of get lost. Your voice gets lost. Remember, you don't just want to throw down, this article says, this article says, this article says. That's not the job of this type of paper. Instead, I say, you don't have to say I say, obviously, but you say what you believe, and then you draw from your research to support that. So psychologist Jane Smith researched and found blah 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 blah. So, you want a credentialer, so you might say Jane Smith, renowned psychologist from Harvard University, believes blah blah blah. You don't need to list the title of her article or the publication. That'll all appear on your works cited page, and it can weigh down that paragraph if you're listing a big long title and all her credentials. You want to do it rather concisely in this format, okay? In your annotated bibliographies, yeah, you absolutely had to fully credential your authors, but this is a little bit different because this is your position, and the support provided is there to bolster your argument. So you want to balance that. You definitely want to credential them. You don't just want to say, and Jim Jones believes blah blah blah, because as a reader, I'm saying, who's Jim Jones and why do I care about what he has to say? So if Jim Jones is a medical doctor who's done extensive research on concussions or whatever your topic might be, then I want to know that. I don't just want to think like it's your neighbor or something. So it gives you ethos. It builds your credibility. And that's what you want to do. And that's how you insert those. Now you have to do that smoothly. You can't just like abruptly engage. That's the other big piece that many of you need to work on, and that is transitions. Okay, linking ideas. The end of one paragraph should inevitably lead to the ideas presented in the next paragraph. So your opening line of each paragraph doesn't need to be first, second, third. You don't need it to be chronological, but think in terms of the connection to your thesis statement and then the connection of each of those ideas to one another, and use those ideas to bounce into the next piece of supporting evidence. And if you're organizing clearly, it should be pretty easy to pull those ideas together. If you're having problems, maybe you need to re-examine your organization. All right, there's a lot of different ways to build a paper. All right, just like a lot of different ways to describe something or to tell a story, you have to decide what's most effective. All right, do you want your strongest point of evidence in the front of the paper? Do you want to save it till the end? Do you want to produce an argument counter-argument structure? Those are decisions that you get to make as a writer and as an arguer to decide what is most effective for your position in your style. Okay. The other piece of style that has to come into play is the language you use, meaning the diction. All right, so the words you choose, the syntax, the way you shape your essay, the style you present. You've read a number of different types of essays now. So you've seen the journalistic style, you've seen academic style, you've seen more mainstream media in action. So what is going to work best for you in this, that which is a little bit more of an academic argument, but still maintains a strong presence of you, the writer. So it's sort of that combination between an op-ed where you really hear the writer's voice and a more academic article because you're using some resources to support your argument. I know it's a lot to sort of negotiate, but these are the key points that I wanted. I want you to keep in mind as you move through it. If you're struggling to produce your in-text citations and to perfect your works cited page, please, please, please go to the OWL, OWL at Purdue, and I have a link on it in the resources, and there are a number of other links, but you need to follow either MLA and do it consistently, or APA and do it consistently. You can't blend them. And you honestly, nobody who's ever going to expect you to memorize that stuff, but you do have to take the time to look it up. Okay, how you cite, how you document, what to do if you're blocking a quote, how you modify those in-text citations, those parenthetical citations, what your works cited page should look like. It's a little bit discouraging because for many of you, I left comments on your annotated bib rough draft, left comments on the final draft, and then on this one in just your works cited page, it doesn't have to be annotated, but your works cited page, you're still not using those hanging indents. That means you begin at the left margin and you indent subsequent lines. You're still not putting them in alphabetical order. You're not giving me dates or full publication information or accessed information. These are things that honestly you have to just look up. And you may have to look them up every single time you do it for the next 4 years. It's really not a big deal. It takes a minute to retrieve that information. I don't have it committed to memory. Honestly, I don't, well, first of all, even if you did commit to memory, they change it in a couple of years anyway. That's why you have to consult those resources that are available to you. So use them and use them wisely. So make sure that those are perfected. You also need to have a final paper overview for this capstone essay. Okay, don't forget, I just want you to reflect a little bit on what you have, what you did, how you feel about what you did. I'd like for you to think a little bit about the key marks or hallmarks of your essay. Like, what do you think is strongest? Do you think you're very logical in your presentation of your argument? So it's almost like you're rhetorically analyzing your own argument just as you've done with others. Okay, so having said that, that's your capstone. It's going to be due Sunday night at midnight. Oh, everybody should have them posted now on the discussion board, and your feedback to the other people in your group is due tonight, Friday night by midnight. So make sure that you get that done, and you should have my feedback already. Okay, so there's the capstone, and I know that's the biggie, is the big paper. The next component is the blog entry. I apologize, I did it again. Initially, I'd planned on having those due on Monday nights, just so that it didn't come in when everything else was coming in. And then I had to modify it the first week. And then, so you've seen some disparaging things there in terms of or disagreeing dates. I guess dates don't really disagree. Conflicting dates, let's go with that. But I would like the fourth blog entry by Monday night. Okay, it's a free-for-all again. You can write about anything that you want. I'd like to see your position come through. Some of you are doing just beautifully with your blog entries. Others of you are still just really not embracing that forum. I always want to say medium, and then, which is the namesake of the blog site. But it's true. Some of you are doing fabulously, and others of you are just like, oh my gosh, I'm going to spit out a few sentences. That's not what a blog is either. You have to develop it. So find something that interests you, something that you can promote your point of view on. So presumably something argumentative, at least controversial, I guess is maybe a better word. We're also opening into week 5, which is our last week, and you have a number of things due. They're smaller things. But they're things. I'm going to ask you to begin thinking about a way to recast your capstone argument. All right, so if you've just given me an essay on gun control, it's a very general topic. It's a lot